Hello and welcome to the first introductory episode of Bionicle Explained. This is part one of a two-part introduction to this series that will be explaining all things Bionicle. These first two episodes serve as a premise of sorts to the series, as they are meant to introduce a casual person to Bionicle by addressing two of the most common asked questions about it. What is the general story of Bionicle, and how can I get into Bionicle? Now, if you already know a bit about Bionicle, or want to go in fully blind, I'd suggest skipping this part and moving to the second part, how to get into Bionicle, to learn the best way to tackle the story. But if you want to find out generally what Bionicle is about, and don't mind light spoilers, then this is for you. And if you aren't sure whether the spoilers will bother you, I'll explain a bit more about them in a moment, so that may help you make your decision. If you want to learn more about the overall series of Bionicle Explained, check out the Welcome to Bionicle Explained video. That, the second introductory episode, and all other episodes are in the Bionicle Explained playlist linked in the video description or found in the thumbnail linked at the end of the video. Now onto the topic of this video, the general story of Bionicle. Coming up with the best way to give a general overview of Bionicle proved to be a bit more difficult than I originally imagined. I had to walk a fine line of introducing newcomers to where the story starts without spoiling major events. But the thing is, there are just some details about the Bionicle universe that may be beneficial to know from the beginning. Bionicle was developed over the course of nearly 10 years. Ingesting all of that story at once can be a bit overwhelming. Giving an overview can help establish a stronger context and just gives more of an understanding of how the universe works. So, after thinking for a long time on this, here is what I came up with. First off, this video will mostly be giving a general summary of the state of the universe up until the beginning of the Bionicle story in 2001. This actually includes the 2004 through 2005 story, as well as these 2 years served as a prequel to the previous 3 years of Bionicle, 2001 through 2003. I believe understanding how the protagonists got to the point they were at the beginning of 2001 will help shed light on what the main story is leading towards, while also introducing key aspects of the universe. Without these events taking place, the protagonist's main goal, which by extension is the goal of the main Bionicle story, could just not take place. So that's why understanding the circumstances of why they need to achieve that goal are very important to hear. There will be a few other details I mentioned that were introduced in other random years of Bionicle, but these will be used to establish some origins/aspects of the Bionicle universe, which again, I believe will help introduce it to new fans. As a quick note, while there are many other major events, such as the Element Lord's rule of Spherus Magna or the Matoran Civil War, that are the same if not more important than the events that take place during the main Bionicle story, they aren't necessarily important to having a general understanding of what Bionicle is about or getting started with it. Like I've said, I'm just doing a general introduction/overview here. Besides, if you are interested enough to start exploring Bionicle, you'll wind up reading about these major events in story serials, guidebooks, and other amazing side stories. So there will be light spoilers here, but nothing crazy like specific character deaths or defining character moments. As I said at the beginning of the video, if you already know you want to dive into Bionicle, then it may be best going in completely blind, as you'll find out about all this as you read. But if you really have no idea what it is about and would like to find out about the universe and story before starting, I believe this is a great introduction to the characters, the world, and sets the stage for what the story is about. I think these light spoilers really live up to being light. With that being said, though, there are a couple, two in fact, slightly bigger spoilers that I personally believe could be helpful in gaining some insight and clarifying a few things about the universe. These are only 2 of those details I mentioned before that go beyond the 2001 story. They aren't exactly story spoilers, but more so reveals about the universe itself. This was quite literally a plot point in the Bionicle story about how certain characters were hiding this information and others were not being privy to the knowledge. There have even been debates among the fans about whether or not this should have been shared from the beginning. But again, I really think it could help explain a few things about how the universe works and make some parts about the world that can potentially be confusing less. Since many in the fandom may disagree with me revealing these two things, I'll be putting in a special spoiler warning at certain parts of the video to signal when I am going to be talking about these two slightly larger spoilers. To keep with the theme of Bionicle and the idea of skipping time, we'll use the Vahi, the legendary mask of time, to signify when I'm talking about these larger spoilers. If you see this on the screen or in the thumbnail preview and don't want to hear the spoiler, just skip on past until you don't see it anymore. I'll also be including the time codes in the video description. As a disclaimer, this is in no way an official overview for Bionicle or the only way to generally describe the story. This is just my interpretation of how to introduce Bionicle to those that are unfamiliar with it. I'm sure there may be a key detail that you may think is important for newcomers, or a detail that maybe I should have left out, but this is my overview based upon my experiences as a fan since just after Bionicle's inception in 2001. Finally, with all of that out of the way, we can start at the beginning, and what better place to start than where the events of Bionicle take place. While there are mentions of other existing star systems in the Bionicle universe, the entire story takes place in a specific star system called the Solus Magna system. This system housed one planet called Spherus Magna. Native to the planet were the Aggori and the Glotorian species. Both species were mostly organic in nature with few mechanical components, but the Glotorian differed from the Aggori in their greater speed and strength, often serving a warrior-like role. Now over 150,000 years ago, in the Bionicle timeline, Spherus Magna was initially ruled by a group called the Great Beings. They were actually a specific group of Glotorian, nicknamed the Great Beings by other Aggori due to their high intelligence and passion to build, study, and invent. They were fascinated by the stunning planet of Spherus Magna and believed there to be infinite possibilities to gaining vast amounts of knowledge. Skipping ahead to around 100,000 years ago, a substance called energized protodermis was discovered on Spherus Magna. Energized protodermis was soon discovered to be a very powerful and dangerous substance that had the ability to destroy or transform nearly everything it came into contact with. It has an incredible significance in the Bionicle universe as it is used as an energy source amongst other things. So, a discovery of this scale did cause great conflict on the planet of Spherus Magna and led to the destabilization of the planet. The Great Beings decided to use their high intelligence to research protodermis and use it to create a being that could further foster their knowledge base and help save the planet. After many tests and trials, they created this sentient being known as the Great Spirit, Mata Nui. Mata Nui quickly departed the planet to begin pursuing one of his primary directives: observe and learn from the universe. However, soon after he left, the conflict over protodermis on the surface of Spherus Magna took a turn for the worse as the planet couldn't sustain any more damage. An event called the Shattering took place, causing the planet of Spherus Magna to shatter into 3 pieces. One piece that completely encapsulated the Great Sea on Spherus Magna broke off and became the oceanic planet of Aqua Magna. Another broke off from the Great Jungle and became the jungle planet of Bada Magna. Lastly, the remaining part of Spherus Magna was the Great Barren, a region devoid of natural resources. It became known as the barren wasteland of Bara Magna. Similar to his creators, though, Mata Nui seemed to neglect his duties in favor of the pursuit of knowledge. So rejoining Spherus Magna wasn't exactly at the top of his list. He eventually even began to turn a blind eye towards his people who so desperately loved and idolized him. But let's rewind for a second as I'm getting a little far ahead. I think it's a good time now to speak more on Mata Nui himself, as yes, you did hear that right, Mata Nui did care for an entire race of beings. This place that Mata Nui was also tasked with watching over was called the Matoran Universe. It comprised of various places, islands, cities, etc., and was inhabited by a species called the Matoran. Now, the entire Matoran universe and its Matoran inhabitants were created by the Great Beings, but unlike the Aggori, Matoran were about 85% mechanical and 15% organic. The purpose of the Matoran was rather simple, to live in and maintain society, and they had complete adoration for their all-loving, all-caring, and generous overseer, the Great Spirit Mata Nui. While Matoran did inhabit other parts of the Matoran universe, they were mostly in the great city of Metra Nui. So where exactly was Metra Nui in the Solus Magnus system? This answer can be a bit complicated as it starts to get into one of those slightly bigger spoilers I mentioned before. So first, the non-spoiler version. The Matoran universe, including Metra Nui, is technically on the planet of Aqua Magna. In fact, most of the Bionicle Story documented from 2001 through 2010 takes place on Aqua Magna. Now, I say technically on Aqua Magna because eventually where the Bionicle Story begins, in 2001, it is on Aqua Magna, but at this point, 100,000 years ago, it's a bit more complicated. And this is where the first Mask of Time spoiler comes in. But again, it's not really a plot spoiler, more so one that reveals parts of the universe, and I recommend listening as I think it is beneficial to fully understanding everything. Alright, here we go. Mata Nui himself is actually a giant robot, and the Matoran universe is contained inside of him. So all those islands, cities, and various places are inside of him, and all the species living in those places are living inside of him. As they live, they are essentially maintaining the life of Mata Nui, with certain species/beings having a more pronounced role in that. So as Mata Nui was exploring the universe, the Matoran universe was traveling around with him since they were quite literally part of him. But how exactly he got to Aqua Magna, I'll get back to that later in the second Mask of Time spoiler section. But for now, this is the whole reason for me saying that technically the Matoran universe was not on Aqua Magna at this time. Getting back to where we were, besides the Matoran universe comprised of other beings as well. One large and very important species was created by Mata Nui himself and called the Makuta. They belonged to a faction similarly named the Brotherhood of Makuta. All of the Makuta were given the ability to command the power of shadow and were initially tasked by Mata Nui with creating Rahi to fill the universe with. And very quickly, Rahi are essentially creatures or wildlife with much lower intelligence than the other species I've mentioned. The point of the Rahi was, pretty much, to populate the Matoran universe with life. Anyway, the Makuta's role expanded greatly over time, and eventually they served as the enforcers of peace, stability, and order in the Matoran universe. The Brotherhood of Makuta would go on to be the main antagonists of the Bionicle Story, but their journey to that will be explained later on. Another species in the Matoran universe, this one created by the Great Beings, and the main protagonists of the Bionicle Story were the Toa. The purpose of the Toa was to serve and defend the primary residents of the Matoran universe, the Matoran. Each Toa possessed some sort of elemental power, while also being able to harness the power of the Kanohi, or mask they wore. While there are many different elements, the 6 main ones that are most commonly possessed by the Toa in the main story are fire, water, air, ice, earth, and stone. Initially, Toa worked pretty independently, but eventually they would form Toa teams and work together. Again, this is how most of the Toa in the main Bionicle Story are seen. The Toa teams would be assigned all over the Matoran universe to serve different purposes. One was actually assigned to help protect the Brotherhood of Makuta at one point. Now, the Toa team we meet right at the beginning of the Bionicle Story in 2001 was designed by the Great Beings to only be sent out when Mata Nui was in danger. We'll speak more about them later on. Lastly, the Great Beings wound up designing many different protocols and items to not only ensure the survival of Mata Nui, but to serve many different purposes in the Matoran universe. From legendary Kanohi such as the Agnika or Mask of Life, which could restore the life of Mata Nui, all the way to Great Kanohi and many other beings and creatures. Mata Nui himself as well created many other species and items that inhabited the universe, but as you read through the Bionicle Story, you'll learn more about everything that both him and the Great Beings created. So now that the various components, species, and items of the Bionicle universe seem to be pretty well established, we can skip ahead around 99,000 years to only 1,000 years before the main Bionicle Story. And this leads us directly to the 2004 through 2005 story, which, as mentioned before, is a prequel to where Bionicle begins in 2001. During this massive time jump, the universe was operating rather normally. There was just quite a bit of scheming going on amongst other conflicts and events taking place that aren't as important for understanding the general story of Bionicle. But the most important thing to realize what happened during this time was the descent of the Brotherhood of Makuta. Once tensions in the Matoran universe began to rise, various Makuta were assigned to different parts of the world to maintain order. After successfully completing their task, the Brotherhood cemented their role as the enforcers of peace, stability, and order in the universe. During this time, however, one Makuta named Pterodax began to rise in the ranks of the Brotherhood, accumulating influence and power in the organization. Pterodax had dangerous and bold ambitions and proposed the idea that the Brotherhood overthrow the Great Spirit Matanui. Many in the organization, like Pterodax, were corrupt, arrogant, and really only looking for more power and influence than they already had. After he overthrew the current leader of the Brotherhood, Pterodax began to set his plan in motion to overthrow Matanui and began to secretly enslave Matoran. While this was happening, the Makuta began to evolve and even purged their inner light, becoming full and immensely powerful creatures of shadow. Word began to slowly spread of the Brotherhood's reputation in seemingly chaotic descent, so much so that the Toa team assigned to protect the Brotherhood, the Toa Haga, defected and attempted to stop whatever the Brotherhood was planning. But the Toa Haga's realization was far too late. The Brotherhood had already been strategically planning their ascension for years, and there was little that could be done to stop it. Remember before when I mentioned that Matanui began to turn a blind eye towards his people? Well, this is when it was taking place. Matanui was far more interested in the discovery of the universe, so he was not paying attention to the unsettling events that were taking place in the Matoran universe, and by extension, did not see what was coming. The Matoran universe was on the brink of chaos, and very few actually knew of the imminent danger. However, one brave Toa, Lee Khan, began to realize that there were nefarious forces at work. For starters, he was pretty much the only Toa left to defend Metru Nui, home of the Matoran. After the Toa Dark Hunter War, many Toa were either killed or left Metru Nui and were reassigned elsewhere, spreading the Toa rather thin. The remaining members of Lee Khan's Toa team, the Toa Mangai, either betrayed the others or were killed after being coerced into certain missions by the Makuta. Knowing he had to act quickly, Lee Khan stole Toa stones and gave them to 6 brave Matoran who had used them to become the Toa Metru. I'll be keeping the identities of the Toa Metru secret, as I think this is a spoiler that no one should know until they read it in the story. So the Toa Metru did everything they could to uncover the plot that was threatening the Matoran, but unfortunately, they were too late. Pterodax had created a virus that had cast Matanui into a great sleep. The once all-powerful leader of the Matoran universe was in an eternal sleep, and there was nothing he could do to save his people. In acts of sheer bravery, the young Toa Metru were able to unify, fend off Pterodax, and seal him in a cage of protodermis. But it was too late. The Great Spirit had fallen, and chaos surrounded the once great city of Metru Nui. This event, of Matanui being cast into a deep sleep, would later be referred to as the Great Cataclysm. Damages from the Great Cataclysm were too great at the time to stand Metru Nui, so the Toa Metru and some of the Matoran they managed to rescue were forced to leave and look elsewhere on Aqua Magna for a home. And this is where the second and final Mask of Time spoiler will be, so if you don't want to hear it, be sure to skip ahead. We established in the last Mask of Time spoiler that Matanui was a giant robot. So when Pterodax infected Matanui with the virus, the Great Spirit robot's systems were halted. This caused Matanui's journey around the universe to also come to a halt, and he was quite literally free-falling in orbit and crash-landed onto Aqua Magna. So Matanui crash landing was the earthquake that rippled through the Matoran universe and caused all that damage to Metru Nui. Everyone in Metru Nui was then forced to exit the Great Spirit robot and had to look on Aqua Magna for a new place to settle. This is why the main goal of the Bionicle Story, reawakening Mata Nui, heavily relies on getting back to Metru Nui, as it brings them back into the Great Spirit robot. So hopefully this sheds some light on why exactly I said before that the story mostly takes place on Aqua Magna, and how exactly the Great Spirit wound up on Aqua Magna. Getting back to it, the Toa Metru eventually found a nice island on Aqua Magna where they would be able to live, but first it was their duty to return to Metru Nui and rescue the remaining Matoran. This is where the 2005 story picks up, as the Toa Metru return to Metru Nui to find it not at all as they remember. Due to the damages done from the Great Cataclysm, much of the city is destroyed and overrun by hordes of spider-like Rahi called Visorak. Again, the Toa displayed great acts of bravery and were able to rescue the Matoran from the destroyed city of Metru Nui, and they even managed to make new acquaintances along the way. These new acquaintances agreed to stay back on Metru Nui and repair it until it was safe enough for the Matoran to return. But rescuing the Matoran came at a great cost. Due to some complications that I will withhold, Pterodax was freed from his protodermis cage and free to roam the universe. And Pterodax certainly didn't set aside his dreams to rule the universe, as he followed the Matoran to their new home on the island they found on Aqua Magna that they named Mata Nui in honor of the Great Spirit himself. It was a beautiful paradise island with a stable food supply and plenty of resources, and they were able to organize into a rather normal societal structure. Now, the Matoran actually lost all of their memory from what happened prior to arriving on the shores of Mata Nui, as this was a side effect of their brief enslavement from Pterodax. But whispers still circulated of a mysterious foe called Makuta, who put the Great Spirit in an endless sleep and sought to destroy them all. And to clarify, mostly everyone called Pterodax Makuta, and not his real name, as it wasn't known/spoken by many. In fact, in Bionicle, you don't find out that Pterodax is his name until about 2008. So if you are reading through Bionicle and see the name Makuta mentioned, they are referring to Pterodax. They will specify the Brotherhood of Makuta or the Makuta when they are referring to the entire species, but I digress. Before long, Makuta did show up on the island of Mata Nui, but since Makuta was still very weak from his battle with the Toa Metru, he couldn't just annihilate everyone. He did just enough to keep the Matoran and Toraga, the village elders, at bay and prevent them from returning to Metru Nui as he slowly regenerated his power. Remember before when I mentioned a Toa team that the great beings designed to only be sent out when Mata Nui was in danger? Well, as prophesied, the Toa Mata, as they were called, were sent out to begin their mission of reawakening Mata Nui. But a malfunction in their transport canister's navigation system caused them to never reach the Matoran settled on the island of Mata Nui. So over the next 1,000 years, the Matoran and Toraga managed to survive as best they could, while Makuta kept them trapped on the island, preventing them from returning to Metru Nui in attempting to wake the Great Spirit. But as time went on, the Makuta regained more of his power and was becoming stronger. His attacks were becoming more ferocious, and it was only a matter of time before the Matoran and Toraga would meet their end. The Matoran and Toraga were desperate for the legendary Toa to arrive and deliver them from the wrath of Makuta. But one brave Matoran named Takua happened to find 6 Toa stones and used them to emit a signal that reactivated the Toa canisters and summoned them to the island. And this brings us right to the beginning of the Bionicle Story in 2001. 6 heroes wash up on shore: Tahu, Toa of Fire; Gali, Toa of Water; Lewa, Toa of Air; Kopaka, Toa of Ice; Onua, Toa of Earth; and Pohatu, Toa of Stone. These 6 heroes have arrived to fulfill their destiny, protect the Matoran, and reawaken Mata Nui, and, unknown to them at the time, return to their destined home of Metru Nui to begin their steps to reawakening Mata Nui. But the rest of the story, or shall I say, the beginning of the story, is for you to find out on your own. And that concludes my overview of what the general story of Bionicle is. I know there were a lot of logistics to go over at the beginning, but I think that was really important in not only establishing who this video is made for, but also how I envision introducing someone to Bionicle without just hammering through the details of the story. And I know I skimmed through the 2004 and 2005 story fairly quickly and was vague in certain areas, But that was because I was interested in telling more so how the events affected the state of the universe rather than specific characters and character moments. You'll find out about all of that as you read through the story yourself. I hope you all were intrigued by the story and understand why so many passionate fans like myself have fallen in love with it. There is certainly a lot to Bionicle, and of course, you can experience it just like myself and many fans did back in the day without any prior knowledge. But I think having a general context can not only make you understand what is going on and the stakes better, but also help get you hooked. Thank you everyone for watching. I can't say enough how great the world Greg Farshchi, Christian Faber, and the entire Bionicle team created is, and I hope you discover it soon. Be sure to tune in to the second part of the introductory episode of Bionicle Explained, How to Get into Bionicle, to learn about the mediums Bionicle is told through and how and what way to read those. Also, don't forget to check out the other episodes as well as leave suggestions in the comments for future episodes. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to subscribe and join my Discord server, Infinity Sun Collaborations. This is a Discord community where you can not only hang out in an awesome community and talk about many topics such as Bionicle, but also have the opportunity to collaborate with other content creators on projects. The link to join is in the video description. And with that, I will talk to you guys later.